Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Trig Podcast of Joy and Gosa TV on this beautiful Monday, October 28, 2019. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to this video. Make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification wherever you're watching me on Instagram, on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, wherever. Thank you for being here. Talking today, part two of let's say a 10-part series, perhaps. I'm not sure yet if it'll be that long, called How to Overcome Trauma. How to Overcome Trauma. I've been thinking a lot about post-traumatic stress syndrome, PTSD, in maybe it was 2008, 2009, so about 10 years ago. I went through a training with my therapist called MDSR, AMDR. It's basically a therapy process where you hold on to these vibrating probes in your hands, and then through that, I'm not sure of all the psychology behind it. This was with an actual therapist. This wasn't some weird thing. You begin to get in touch with that trauma that is deep inside of you. I was listening to some statistics that they say that 99% of people with trauma never recover. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's actually pretty accurate, meaning you get better and you definitely grow. I definitely have grown from some of my childhood trauma, but I don't think the goal is to eliminate it somehow, but to work with it, to learn from it, and to not give into it. And so I was thinking about a few steps, I was listening to a training recently on this same topic that kind of connected some dots for me. And here's some steps on how to overcome trauma. First is to see negative things as positive. To see negative things as positive. And now, I think there are limits to this. I mean, if I have a friend who has cancer, and I think that there are certain experiences where you definitely have a tougher time seeing as positive or as helpful or useful. But, even in those horrible moments, my father had a very difficult disease also at the end of his life. And even at the end of his life, he would tell my mom that he saw it as a positive thing in his life because it was shaping him and helping him to be more like Christ and helping him to pray and all these things. And so, like for me, I see my church and there's less and less people and I see it struggling, and my mind, my trauma tells me I'm failing, everything is falling apart, the end is near. And those things might or may not be true, but the other way that I could look at this, let's say the other truth, the other alternate maybe universe, would be to see this as a new beginning. Everything has to die and something new is coming. I remember I don't know if it was my mom who told me this, going back to my dad's illness, or maybe it was a verse that I read right after he passed away, where it says in the Bible that for something new to be born, the seed has to first die. And, with my dad, what has been born since my father's death? Well, a lot of things. And my point is that in your life, there may be things that are dying, that are not as they used to be. But when you look at them as exclusively as negative things, that's usually your trauma talking. When I look at my church and I look out there and I see 30 people, 20 people, 10 people, 3 people, it's the trauma of my life, of my past, that has been mostly dealing with loss and mostly with that it's all my fault, tells me that there's no hope. But reality is that there's all the hope in the world for, let's say in my case, for my church. And I can list all the reasons why there is so much hope, even though my eyes, my senses only see the negative. I was preaching the other day about a passage where Jesus tells John 4, the Samaritan woman, to go and find her husband. And the woman says, I have no husband. And Jesus says, you're right, because you have 5 and neither of them are you married to. She was a prostitute, a woman who had many relationships, but no commitment. And you could think about that in however way maybe we need to think about it. But here's the point. When Jesus said to her, I am the river of life. If you drink of me, you will never thirst again. He was alluding to this number 5. And I enjoy numbers in the Bible. They definitely have meaning. In that culture, in the Samaritan culture, this woman was Samaritan, there were 5 gods, 5 false gods that Samaritans normally would worship. And so Jesus was trying to bring down and destroy those false gods by saying, I am the true God, not these other 5 false gods, these other 5 men. And then the commentaries, the commentarist, the author of this commentary that I was reading, was mentioning how we have 5 senses and how many times our negative thoughts come because of our senses, because of what you perceive. So when let's just going back to my church, when I'm in the office and I'm with my team and I'm worshiping, I'm practicing on my guitar, I'm studying the Bible, getting ready for Sunday, even when I'm just there at 8:30 and we're just practicing and there's nobody there yet, my senses are fully focused on God. I haven't seen anything good, bad, or whatever. But when I see the empty room, because obviously our hall seats 200 people and there's 40, 30 people in there, my senses, those 5 senses of sight and hearing and touch and all these things, they become my false God. You know what I'm talking about? They replace the truth of the one living God. Because just even speaking from experience yesterday, I came in feeling completely in love with God, ready to serve, worship, be filled with joy. I was so excited about my passage that I was going to speak on. It was about our Heavenly Father, something very personal to me. But the minute that I saw the empty room and just the quietness of the room and all the stuff that happens with an empty room, my senses were telling me all these lies. And so my belief and my trauma began to get triggered, and then I just had to hang on for dear life. Now, that happened yesterday. All of last night, I was feeling horrible. Last night, finally, at around 11 p.m., I began to believe the truth. And of course, my wife is my greatest truth teller. I also have some friends that will always tell me the truth. This morning, I woke up kind of in a similar place, but about an hour ago, just praying, processing all this stuff, reading the Bible, just reliving my lies, or telling myself the truth and ignoring the lies. I finally broke through, back to the true me, a man filled with hope and joy, seeing the quote negative things around me as opportunities, as possibilities. And so when you are in that place, you have to, as I said first, see the negative as positive. Not just by ignoring things, but by realizing that your trauma, your senses is it's causing you this problem. So here's the number 2 step. Identify, how is it that you perceive negativity? How is it that your mind goes from positive to negative? What happens exactly? And specifically speaking of your senses, is there a particular person or word or maybe something that you eat, a memory that you had? Is there something in your senses, in the 5 senses that we have, that triggers that trauma, that negativity? Third is to then overcome those senses by asking someone for support and prayer in those moments. So for example, for me, the thing that brings me down is the empty room, seeing the emptiness of the room, seeing people be so quiet in there because there's less people. And you know how it is when you're in an empty room and there's only a few of you, you get very quiet. And so kind of that spirit of power and joy that we've been having suddenly goes out the window. So what I have been doing is asking some of my friends to come into the room and to fill the room with joy, with worship, with hands in the air. And so I have a few friends that are very outward and very expressive. And so instead of having them be outside, I say, hey, why don't you come sit in the front so that you can give me the appearance, meaning I don't mean that it's a lie, but the visual maybe is what a better word, of joy. And that triggers me in a positive way. That triggers me towards hope, back to the true me of power and hope and joy. So identify what is that sensual, let's call it, trigger. How does it come into your brain and triggers you into something negative? And then what can you do to defeat that sense? So if for you, let's say it's you eat, I don't know, the wrong thing. You eat a burger, you eat some fries, you have a Coke, and then you look in the mirror or you wake up that next day and you feel, you feel unhealthy. Maybe then a very simple solution to that would be to have your friend text you that night. Let's say you've eaten that burger and the fries and combo number one at McDonald's. And that friend will text you and say, no matter what, you are still beautiful. No matter what, you are still a beautiful person. That way, even though your senses are telling you, oh, see, there you go again. You're always going to be overweight, unhealthy, whatever. You're having somebody else, not you, not just your own thoughts, someone else speaking truth into your life. It could be your husband, your wife, your friend, your roommate. I would recommend that it be something outside of you, that it's not just you, because sometimes we get into our little spin cycles, right? And we can't get out of that mess. Another thing that I think triggers people, or maybe the third step, is to avoid triggering people and triggering situations, or even triggering apps on your phone. One of the things that is, I think, the worst thing for those of us, I guess I would include myself in this, that are online, is seeing all the numbers or the lack of numbers. So right now, just being honest, I'm here and I have this thing here to the side that tells me who's watching. I have 0 people watching, 0 hearts, 0 people watching, 0 everything. And this is across like 6 platforms at the same time. Now, everything in me, you can imagine, right? This is maybe my 200th show, 500th show. I've done so many of these. Everything in me tells me you are a horrible person. You can't speak. You are too old. I mean, I just go through my list of negative things based on these numbers. And then I begin to compare myself. Well, look at that person. That's why he's so popular, because he's younger, because he's more articulate, because he's got a bigger church. I begin to then believe through my senses of eyes and of what I'm seeing in terms of these numbers, all these horrible things about me. Now, the truth is that even if that was true, that there is a bigger problem, right, with being online, of the famous analytics and all of these things that happen, right? You can have a million reasons why it's not about me, that it's about the algorithm. Even believing that it's someone else's fault, I think, is not enough. You ultimately have to believe that you are amazing, that it doesn't really matter about the numbers. And you have to then, what I often do, and I haven't done this in a while, but when I was first starting online, I would put tape, like that blue painter's tape, over all of those zeros and hearts and all of the likes and all of that stuff, so that when I'm here looking into this camera and I look down or to the left or to the right, I don't see those statistics, so that those senses are not affecting or triggering my brain. But instead, I am just simply, like they say, see no evil, hear no evil, do no evil. So you have to identify that trigger and remove it from your life. Your thing may not be online stuff. It might be a person. It might be someone that you're close to. That person, and not just a person, but something they do triggers you. You might be a leader. You might have a teacher or a friend at school. Maybe you're an educator. And you have someone in your school or in your, at work that triggers you, that you believe is out to get you. They're difficult to get along with. They don't really respect you. They want to hurt you or harm you in some way. You might then need to remove yourself from that person. Instead of trying to heal, fix them, be the best person, be so positive and basically fix them, what if maybe you take a step back and let the process take care of them? Let somebody else deal with it. Even if it's your responsibility, let the process take care of it, so that you're not being triggered into that person that you don't want to be. So That step is very important. Removing yourself from that triggering situation or those senses that affect you. And I would say the last thing, maybe the fourth step, is to get the right stuff into your brain. Get the right information into your brain, because our truth and our trauma is triggered by our senses. The good news is that you can then put good stuff into your system and you'll be triggered positively. You'll be triggered to do good things, to become an awesome person. So for me, podcasts are maybe the best way that I hear the truth. I'll listen to podcasts that are on spiritual development, on positive thinking, on how to grow, how to become more a better leader, how to become stronger, how to be a better speaker. And be careful not to have too many to-dos kind of stuff, that you're not just listening to more expectations, but that you're listening to stuff that gives you strength from the inside out. Obviously, the Bible, prayer, meditation, talking to friends, having constantly that positivity into your brain is vital, because, as I said, our senses are the gateway into our psyche, into how we perceive life. And so if you put the right stuff into your mind, then your mind can't even tell the difference between good or bad. It'll just naturally emote or reflect positivity. So another thing that I love to do when I'm kind of in a bad spot, excuse me, is to play my guitar, to make beats, as you've seen me do, to meet with people. I love that. Maybe that is the number one way that I get healthier, is by meeting with people, listening, talking, just sharing with them. Probably another thing is to study, especially when it comes to preaching, studying and imagining all the great things that I'm going to say to people on Sunday. That whole process is so powerful. And so you have to know, what are those input moments? What are those things that you can do to bring the right stuff into your mind? Eliminating some of those negative things, maybe a video, maybe a Twitter feed, maybe a whole app completely, maybe get off of Facebook for a year, and actually allow positive things to enter your mind. I have a friend who, every time that someone forgets their birthday or maybe a celebration, she gets into this really negative space where she feels bitter and she feels mad, and like nobody, it's not just sadness, but it becomes a pretty bitter kind of a rage thing. And so what I try to tell my friend is to, instead of focusing on who isn't remembering your birthday or your anniversary or whatever it may be, instead is celebrate yourself, is to allow your senses to be filled with action. So you go out to a restaurant that night and you invite 2 or 3 friends. And then, instead of you waiting for somebody else to tell you happy birthday, you are creating a place that is, and maybe it's not ideal, right? You don't want to do that, but this is part of the healing. You create a place where people are able to say, we love you and happy birthday. And it helps your senses to not get stuck in the negative, but instead that love comes into the room, into your mind. The room is filled with loving people. You feel loved, you feel accepted, and then out of you comes gratefulness and the usual amazing person that you really are. So these tips are so important, to isolate yourself from those negative people, to think of it as to think of negativity or negative things as something positive, to remove yourself from negative things, but also to let positive things enter your mind. So in a practical way, for me, the way that I am practicing this every day with my church again, is to see the empty room as a room that is filled with awesome people. I have this one congregant who's so positive, always telling me great things. And if I begin to believe the lies that this is a bad situation, what is she going to feel from me? She's going to feel that negativity, right? But if I am thinking positive thoughts about the church or about the people and valuing those people as I do, but not just thinking of the negative stuff, what are people in the room going to feel? They're going to feel my positivity, my love. They're going to feel my hopefulness. And so I can't wait until Sunday to be positive. What I can do is follow these steps, is to retrain my mind, is to do something so I can get the right stuff and the right people in the room, so that what's happening in that hour can be filled with joy, excuse me, be filled with power, filled with gozo, filled with all the good stuff. I think that these issues of trauma are very important. And like this therapist said, is this going to be a problem for the rest of my life or your life? Probably, but there is growth to be made. There is growth to be had. And I believe that I am growing, that these are things that are very important to learn, that if another thing that I often do is when it comes to the empty room, I think, well, what if we were in a small room? Imagine if there were only like, maybe if we were in a room that was small and these 30 people were in there. If they were at my house, how would I feel? I would feel amazing. I would feel so positive, right? You have to reframe your mind, reframe your thinking until you finally get to that positivity so that you can then deal with the issues. Does thinking positive get rid of the problem? No, but it gives you the mindset to be able to then go into that challenge with hope, with love, with joy. I hope these tips will help you. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you next time.